see Mom. Cena says never give up. And I'm now cancer-free.
That's great. That's great.
On the June 27th, 2002 episode of SmackDown, John Cena made his WWE debut. He stepped up to main event star Kurt Angle and made it clear that he was all about ruthless aggression. The debut itself was one of the best ever, but that said, Cena's persona was pretty one-dimensional. Muscly guy who has ruthless aggression. That was it. After a few months, WWE were about to pull the pin on John Cena. With a roster that was as stacked as any roster ever, to survive in 2002, you needed true it factor. You needed something to stand out. And then, randomly, John Cena got into a freestyle rap battle with Rikishi and Rey Mysterio, and Stephanie McMahon saw this impressed Stephanie McMahon, and in the process, John Cena completely saved his career. With that, the Doctor of Thugonomics character was born, and a superstar was made in the wrestling business. Nowadays, it is almost unanimous that John Cena is wrestling's last true megastar. But, what if WWE fired John Cena in 2002? What if Stephanie McMahon wasn't impressed by Cena's freestyle rap abilities and WWE pulled the pin on this 25-year-old kid from West Newbury, Massachusetts? That's what I'm here to run you through today. So, without further ado, let's get into this. At the conclusion of the 2002 Halloween-themed episode of SmackDown, the article is published on WWE.com saying that WWE wishes John Cena the best in his future endeavors. This leaves John Cena emotionally crushed and mentally crushed for a few months for a little while. The WWE continues to chug along just fine without Cena in the remainder of 2002 and into 2003. WrestleMania 19 remains the same, as it's one of the all-time great wrestling shows, headlined by young stars Brock Lesnar and Kurt Angle, going one-on-one in the main event for the WWE Championship, on a card that also features Austin vs. Rock 3, Michaels vs. Jericho, and even Triple H completely burying Booker T. Around this time in 2003, Cena in real life would receive some WWE Championship opportunities. But as you can't see Cena in this timeline, instead WWE opt to give these opportunities to young star Chuck Palumbo. Okay, WWE see the size and charisma of Palumbo and view him as a future star in the company, so Palumbo gets these opportunities. At WrestleMania 20, Chuck Palumbo defeats The Big Show to win the United States Championship. He receives a mixed reaction from Madison Square Garden. Half the crowd like him to an extent, the other half just generally don't like him, think he can't wrestle, he can't stack it with the big dogs, he can't go 30 minutes bell to bell in the ring, what have you, okay? Madison Square Garden's split when it comes to Chuck Palumbo. Yeah, he's too goofy, Vince McMahon guy, etc, etc. Also, after WrestleMania 20, as is the case in real life, Brock Lesnar leaves WWE high and dry, okay? Keep that in mind. With Lesnar gone, WWE look to their future. They see then Evolution member and reigning Intercontinental Champion Randy Orton as the star of the future, alongside his running mate, Dave Bautista. WWE make it their mission to establish Bautista as the big star of one brand and Randy Orton as the big star of another brand, with Chuck Palumbo established as a star as well. This sees us come through the remainder of 2004, where most things stay the same. Randy Orton defeats no one to win big gold at SummerSlam 2004. Then Randy Orton jumps out of the birthday cake on Raw. However, this time, WWE give Randy Orton a bit longer of a first title run. The reign, it isn't much better in this timeline than it was in real life, as Orton drops the title at Survivor Series at Triple H, but nonetheless he gets a few extra months with big gold. Then, at the 2005 Royal Rumble, Randy Orton and Bautista are the final two in the match. Bautista ends up winning the Royal Rumble in 2005 to set up a big WrestleMania showdown with Evolution leader Triple H for the World Heavyweight Championship. Meanwhile, WWE moves babyface Randy Orton to SmackDown and has him make it his mission to dethrone the evil JBL to become WWE Champion. Okay, despite the fact that the entire crowd hates JBL after his 9-month title run, which consisted of segments like, oh, I don't know, this.
Stop right there! Stop right there, you hear me? Stop right there! Get them Mexican skins out of here and you get out of here!
With that said, at WrestleMania 21, we fast forward to there, Edge wins Money in the Bank, Batista overcomes Triple H in the main event, and Randy Orton successfully dethrones John Bradshaw Layfield to win the WWE Championship. From here, Randy Orton successfully defends the WWE title against JBL in an I Quit match at Judgment Day, before coming out on top in a feud with heel Chris Jericho over the summer. Okay, that's what happens for Randy. Throughout all this time, Orton he isn't clicking with the audience. Okay, SmackDown's ratings with Randy Orton as champion begin to tank. WWE, Vince McMahon especially, is getting outraged that his flagship show Monday Night Raw, led by world champion Dave Bautista, Triple H, and young stars like Chuck Palumbo and Edge, is clobbering SmackDown so badly in the ratings. Accordingly, Vince McMahon panics and does a WWE draft. This moves WWE champion Randy Orton over to Raw and Batista over to SmackDown in an attempt to save SmackDown's tanking ratings. So, you might be wondering, Elitus, throughout all of this, what happened to John Cena? Did he vanish? What would he have been doing? Okay, John Cena would have taken a short break from pro wrestling at the end of 2002 for mainly mental health reasons. From here, he would take to the independent circuit in hopes of boosting his indie cred, enough to impress the WWE and earn a job there once again. In early 2003, Cena makes his indie redebut in IWA Mid-South Wrestling. On June 8th, 2003, John Cena wrestled his first ever match against one CM Punk, with the story being that Cena is a privileged, stereotypical WWE muscle guy who has no respect, no indie cred. He needs to put on a great match with Phil Brooks in front of 50 people in some grungy warehouse gym to prove to people like Dave Meltzer that he can indeed wrestle. After a run in the IWA, Cena moved his attention to Ring of Honor. The story remained the same for Cena, that, near enough every match he'd have, the opponent would say, "You can't wrestle, you're all muscle, no skill," and Cena would proceed to have a great 20-minute match with them. In 2004, John Cena began a feud with up-and-coming star Samoa Joe. This led to a trilogy over the summer that featured 2 5-star Dave Meltzer matches and the praise of the entire online wrestling community, okay? Cena and Samoa Joe, absolute classics in Ring of Honor. Then, in early 2005, John Cena made his debut in the Impact Zone. As TNA saw something in this Cena kid, they decided to sign him and pick him up. John Cena right away got into a feud with Jeff Jarrett, yes, Jeff Jarrett, over the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. This proved to be a real turning point for Cena when it comes to winning over the indie fans. Jeff Jarrett would defeat Cena at 3 consecutive pay-per-views, and thus a 2005 early days of social media IWC meltdown took place. Wrestling forum erupted, wrestling MySpace, early days wrestling Facebook broke. Okay, Jeff Jarrett was hated beyond belief for using his creative freedom to bury this young star in John Cena, and thus the IWC almost unanimously became fans of John Cena. After the third loss to Jeff Jarrett, Cena would make waves in the IWC for cutting a scathing shoot promo on Jeff Jarrett, calling him out for his inability to use talent and push anyone but himself. This leads to John Cena leaving Impact Wrestling, both in kayfabe and in real life. By this point, it's late 2005. John Cena makes his shocking debut in New Japan Pro Wrestling, confronting Hiroshi Tanahashi on his debut. This would lead to Cena, also known at this time as The Franchise, taking on the Ace of New Japan. These two would have a couple of classics in late 2005. Then, come 2006, John Cena turned his attention to then IWGP World Heavyweight Champion Brock Lesnar. In the build, Cena cuts the classic anti-Lesnar promos. Basically, I've showed up every day and worked hard for years and years, and it sickens me to see that you show up 8 days a year and get rewarded all these opportunities. Basically a promo like that. This leads to a hard-fought, essentially shoot fight between Brock Lesnar and John Cena in a New Japan ring. Cena is thrown onto his neck several times, he has his arm broken for real, Cena loses some teeth from some Brock Lesnar elbow strikes, as Brock Lesnar legitimately shoots on Cena for real, and basically tries to end his career. After this beatdown, Cena loses and he vanishes. Cena becomes the talk of the town in pro wrestling. He had legitimate babyface drawing power after what Brock Lesnar and Jeff Jarrett did to him. Cena would become wrestling's hottest free agent at this point. Then, with this said, he would make his return to the Impact Zone in the summer of 2006 and have one more match with Jeff Jarrett. This time, Cena defeats Jeff Jarrett in one of the most brutal matches you'll see. Cena had genuine anger in his eyes this time, and the entire time he was just beating Jeff Jarrett senseless, and so many people loved it. Then, per storyline, Cena's win at Hard Justice 2006 over Jeff Jarrett made him a huge babyface star. Cena would become the face of Impact Wrestling, or TNA, for the coming months, as he took on Samoa Joe in yet another match at No Surrender. Then, at TNA Bound for Glory 2006, Kurt Angle made his TNA debut, or at least he does in this timeline. Kurt Angle would stand in the middle of the ring and laugh at Impact Wrestling, laugh at the indies. Angle would laugh at just indie wrestling as a whole. Angle calls Impact, TNA, an absolute, demotion from where he's been in the previous 7 years. And then John Cena's music hits. Cena confronts Kurt Angle for the first time in over 4 years. Angle's facial expression remains completely shocked and locked in the entire time. Kurt Angle takes John Cena extremely seriously. This leads to the Kurt Angle and John Cena trilogy. These matches in late 2006 and early 2007 go down history, with John Cena winning the first, Kurt Angle winning the second, and ultimately Kurt Angle winning the final battle between the two in a 60-minute Iron Man match that goes to overtime. And with that, John Cena's contract with Impact Wrestling came to an end. By this point in the timeline, Vince McMahon is absolutely desperate. Randy Orton, as a world champion, is absolutely not clicking. He has matches with Kurt Angle and Shawn Michaels for the title to round out 2005. Then, at New Year's Revolution 2006, Edge successfully cashes in Money in the Bank and dethrones Randy Orton. WWE puts near enough all their stock, on the Raw side at least, into Edge. Edge is meant to be a heel, but fans are legitimately refusing to cheer Randy Orton as he is that incompetent as a babyface, and thus Edge is being cheered despite being the heel. At WrestleMania 22, we get heel Edge defending the WWE Championship against Randy Orton, with Randy Orton going over and becoming a 2-time WWE Champion. By this point, Orton is legitimately despised. Fans are booing him out of arenas. It's really bad. It's really bad. It's not good. Meanwhile, on SmackDown, everything is going seamlessly as Batista successfully retains Big Gold against Eddie Guerrero at No Mercy 2005 before coming out on top in a feud against JBL. And then Batista has a big WrestleMania 22 world title match against one Kurt Angle. Also, during this time period on SmackDown, Chuck Palumbo has been given an IC title opportunity. He's the IC champion. He's having feuds with Christian, Shelton Benjamin, those types of wrestlers. Chuck Palumbo is a mid-card star. Then, at ECW One Night Stand 2006, Randy Orton gets absolutely abused by fans in the Hammerstein Ballroom. This is much worse than the hate Cena got in real life. This, in ECW One Night Stand 2006, this goes viral after a psychopathic ECW fan legitimately jumps the rail and shoot punches Randy Orton in the face during Orton's WWE title main event with Rob Van Dam. Orton legitimately has teeth broken from this incident, and afterwards, once he drops the title to RVD, takes some time off. During this time, backstage stories are coming out left and right about how terrible Randy Orton is to work with, how uncooperative he is. Raw superstars want to leave and go join Batista on SmackDown. By this point, Vince McMahon, he feels blessed that he stumbles across Bobby Lashley and Umaga. Almost overnight, these two become the biggest stars on WWE's flagship show, Monday Night Raw, as they go one-on-one in the Battle of the Billionaires at WrestleMania 23. Also at WrestleMania 23, The Undertaker continues his WrestleMania streak by defeating and dethroning Batista in an epic for the Big Gold World Heavyweight Championship belt. And, this is worth mentioning as well, Chuck Palumbo wins Money in the Bank.
Well, the wrestling world in shock today. Former champion Chris Benoit found dead in his Atlanta home along with his wife and young son. Police
Benoit apparently strangled his wife Nancy and suffocated their 7-year-old son Daniel.
With that, WWE had to make a change. They needed to do something. They needed to completely change their image and reputation. So, Vince McMahon looked up and down the WWE roster, and he was looking for people to be the next leader, the next face, the next franchise, the next guy who could lead them into this family-friendly direction. And Vince McMahon saw nobody. So, Vince McMahon turned elsewhere. And thus, Vince McMahon turned to one John Cena. Vince McMahon singled out John Cena and gave him an offer that he couldn't refuse. John Cena, after nearly 5 years out of WWE, had been re-signed to the WWE, and right away, he made an impact. No pun intended. Randy Orton would come out on Raw and say that he deserves better than what's been happening lately. Orton would say that the treatment he's received in the past 2 years from fans has been downright disgusting, with fans booing him loudly. Randy Orton says that he didn't deserve the wellness violations he's had, he didn't deserve to be assaulted by a fan, so on and so forth. Then, the time is now hit. John Cena makes his first WWE entrance in nearly 5 years and the crowd erupts. Cena makes it clear that he is here in WWE to not just be a role model and all that kind of stuff. He's here to make a change. He's done watching Randy Orton get all these opportunities. He's here to take one for the team and beat Randy Orton senseless, for lack of better words. So, with that said, John Cena takes on Randy Orton at SummerSlam 2007, with John Cena defeating Randy Orton clean. Then, right when it seems as though Cena's about to get cemented as a main event star in WWE, Cena runs into a bit of a calamity. Okay, Cena tears his pectoral muscle in a match against Mr. Kennedy on October 1st. At this point, Vince McMahon is genuinely considering letting go of Cena once again and just cutting ties with Cena altogether. Vince McMahon makes it clear to Cena that, "Damn it, John, you have one more chance, pal. Damn it, pal." This makes Cena motivated beyond belief to rehab harder than ever before and prove to himself that this is what he's meant to do, prove to Vince that this is what he's meant to do, and prove to the entire wrestling community and wrestling fan base and everyone alike that this is what he was meant to do. And with that, John Cena had arrived. That right there proved to Vince McMahon that this Cena guy was the way to go. This Cena guy was the franchise superstar that the WWE desperately needed following the Benoit tragedy. Okay, at WrestleMania 24, John Cena was unsuccessful in challenging Triple H for the WWE Championship in a triple threat match that also included Randy Orton. By this point, fan support for Cena was immense. He would become the top merch seller by this point in 2008, which impressed Vince McMahon immensely. In late 2008, WWE began a storyline where Vince McMahon had his chosen one, and it would be revealed at Survivor Series. There were mumblings that Vince's chosen one would be a young and up-and-coming superstar like a Drew McIntyre or a Sheamus. But then, lo and behold, Survivor Series 2008 ends with Vince McMahon screwing John Cena out of the WWE Championship and allowing Randy Orton to win yet another WWE Championship. By this point, the outrage per kayfabe with Randy Orton is absolutely immense. People legitimately want Randy Orton killed by this point. It's absolutely obscene. Cena is a big baby face. People want Cena to succeed. He's got the indie cred. Kids are a big fan of him. Women are a fan of him. Merch sales are through the roof. People want Cena to succeed. But Vince McMahon aligns with Randy Orton. So, Orton would come out and build to WrestleMania 25 wearing suits, standing alongside Vince and Stephanie McMahon. This leads up to the big WrestleMania 25 match between John Cena and Randy Orton for the WWE Championship. This would co-main event the show, as Undertaker and Shawn Michaels simply needed to main event the 25th anniversary of WrestleMania. So Cena and Orton co-main events. At WrestleMania 25, John Cena has his first big moment, winning the WWE Championship to a thunderous ovation in front of 75,000 fans. John Cena is made into a true star at WrestleMania 25, and it's only onwards and upwards for him from there. From this moment onwards, John Cena was a made man as far as a WWE main eventer. This indie cred, babyface Cena would become a top merch seller in the company, leading WWE's plight into the PG, family-friendly demographic post-Benoit. Going forward into the 2010s, John Cena no longer had the "he can't wrestle, he only knows 5 moves" tag associated with him by the 18 to 49 demographic and the IWC indie cred demographic. Cena drew in families, he drew in children, and all the whilst being graced by that said IWC, who desperately crave great work rate technicians, okay? Then, the last thing that's worth noting in this timeline, the next big factor that's worth mentioning, summer of 2011, okay? As a result of John Cena being universally beloved as the top babyface star of the company, there was no longer a real audience there for the pipe bomb promo. CM Punk does a feud with Cena in 2011, just, regardless, okay? He does a feud with Cena regardless in 2011, but Punk is seen as a whiny heel. The Cena needs to silence the Money in the Bank. It's not a voice of the voiceless situation. The voiceless, quote-unquote, doesn't exist. Okay, Punk cuts the pipe bomb. He's seen as like a whiny sellout complainer. He gets banished off to the Indies after Money in the Bank 2011. There's no more of CM Punk. So thus, John Cena takes care of business. He beats CM Punk, and thus, I Deserve Better promos never really click in WWE. They never really make change. They never cultivate action in WWE. And thus, WWE for the remainder of the 2010s and into the 2020s is much better off for the long term. So that has been What If WWE Fired John Cena in 2002. Thank you for watching. I enjoy doing the what ifs, so hopefully you guys do too. Plenty of content coming your way in the next month or so. Lots of videos on the horizon. So yeah, hope you enjoyed. Like, comment, sub, you know the drill. See ya.